Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a teaching with TBA Rabbinic resident Julia Knobloch.
Welcome to the poetry learning of this afternoon. Today I brought a poem by Dalia Ravikovic, who is considered by many to be one of the greatest female Hebrew Israeli. And just a few words about her. She was born in 1936 in Ramat Gan, and she died in 2005. She lost her father pretty early on in her life, and then her mother remarried, and they moved to Ghent, which Dalia left when she feel that I wasn't feel part of the life there and lots of other things. And so she grew up in foster families until she was an adult. And she was married a few times. She had one son, but when she got divorced, she lost custody. And she had a very prolific creative life. She was a journalist, she was a translator, and obviously she was a poet. But she just basically out a life. Like she never got, even though she got the Israel Prize and said as a great poet, but she didn't, in terms of, she was never got the professional kind of enumeration of so that she did. She is also known, especially in later years, political activism, very much against a lot of Israeli settlement policies. The poems that the one poem and maybe the second we're going to look at tonight do not deal with that, but it is definitely part of her curriculum, who she was. She suffered from depressions, and when she died, people in 2005, she was found dead in her apartment by herself, alone, and people assumed at first it might have been a suicide. It was later affirmed that it wasn't, that died of heart failure. But she was a very creative person, and she had a lot of, as I think this poem is going to symbolize, a lot of power and a lot of language, but I think she also lonely and sad times. So I did know of her, but to prepare for this learning, I delved more into her and read up about her a lot, and I was really impressed by her. Taken by this poet's life. So the poem that I brought through is called Bo Yavo, and it is translated as He Shall Surely Come. And as you know, I'm trying hard to get a connection to the weekly parsha that is which I'm teaching, and we are in Parashat Bo. So it was more of an word alliteration sort of association. Let me remember her. The more I read about it, though, the more I read this poem and the more I thought about it, I realized how fitting it is actually for this parasha, because in this parasha, the redemption of the Israelites describes how the Israelites are being taken out of Egypt, which is considered a redemptive event, and everything in this poem, I want to talk with you then once we've read it, with you about it, like how it sort of expresses the anticipation of something that might be considered a redemptive event. It is unclear what it is. There are some suggestions in the text that we can talk about, but and I'm going to read it in English. The printout that you have in person are a little blurred, so forgive for that. It's of what happened. And the source sheet for those online, so you should have two documents. One is the PDF, and the other one, which is the Hebrew one, is actually a screenshot, so it's a picture. So, and you may have to, unless you have already done it, of course, there should be two, and if you don't see them right away, you may want to click inside the folder. There are two attached. בוא יבוא. שנים נוקפות עליי בתרדמה חושים ובחסה הדעת ובגנבת הדעת עד שיפציע ראש זעיר אדום כמו כדור חמה בשקיעתו. בוא יבוא. ברחבי המדבר מאות קילומטרים לכאן ולכאן אין שמץ דבר דומה לזה. יש לי כוח התאפקות בלתי נלאה. אני ישנה הרבה. אני מחכה הרבה. כשהוא יגיע, הוא ייראה. לפעמים אני מתחפשת למתה. כשהאדם נוהג מנהג משונה, השכנים מותחים עליו ביקורת, ומתלחשים באחרי גבו. בציפייה בלתי נלאה, אני נופחת בהרוגים האלה שיחיו. רק מעטים אמנה העזו והיו שעה קלה. לאחרים שוב לא הבאתי שום תועלת. אני שותקת ואוטמת את אוזניי לגערות השוק. וצבעתם האיומה של הרוכלים. רק לעתים אני צועקת מחמת הזעם. מיד אני נוזפת בעצמי שכך קרה. אובדן שליטה עצמית. עליי להניח לזה. עליי להבליק חורף וקיץ. עד שיפציע ראש אדום. פניני ורח, כמותו עין לא ראתה. He shall surely come. Years are passing me by in a slumber of senses, and absent-mindedness, and in deceit, until a tiny head breaks through, red as the ball of the setting sun. He shall surely come. In the broad expanses of the desert, hundreds of kilometers on every side, there's not a hint of anything like it. I have a tireless capacity for self-control. I sleep a lot. I wait a lot. When he shall arrive, he shall be seen. Sometimes I play as dead. When a person acts peculiarly, the neighbors criticize him and whisper behind his back. With a tireless expectation, I breathe upon these slain that they may live. Only a few indeed dared and lived for a short time. I was of no use to the others again. I am silent and shut my ears to the scoldings of the marketplace and the horrible screaming of the peddlers. Only sporadically do I cry out because of the anger. Immediately I scold myself that this had happened, a loss of self-control. I must let it be. I must show forbearance winter and summer, until a red head breaks through, pearl-like and soft, the like of which no eye has ever seen. So I think that this is a very powerful poem. There's the anticipation of something that like no eye has ever earlier. It says nothing like this is known, has happened before. And before I share a few of the things that I think about the poem, I wanted to ask you here or on Zoom, and you know how it goes. You unmute yourself by yourself when you want to say something. What comes up for you? What kind of atmosphere? What do you think? What's going on here with this? Yes. So Jeff said that there's an anticipation of the speaker for her son or husband to arrive, or daughter to arrive. Sure. I mean, there is definitely an illusion of birth. I want to say, especially in the first stanzas, right? Because of the sort of comparison between until a red head will appear, which sort of like suggests a birth, a head coming out of a woman while she's giving birth. So I do think I also thought that there is an allusion to potential birth or the arrival of someone that someone is really waiting for. And it totally works. And at the same time, I also think that there is another level. I think it's a comparison, and I think there might be something even bigger than the arrival of a specific person. I don't know. Remind me your name, please. Rebecca. Thank you. That's beautiful. Rebecca was saying that it reminds her of a flower breaking through the desert soil, right? Because of the mentioning of seasons towards the end of the poem, a red flower. interesting. Yeah, I like that. Is there? I see there's a hand up, but I can't unmute you. So, Gary and Marlis, sorry. They're shake. Oh, you don't want to say anything? You're having your hand up. So, okay. Does anybody else want to say something here? What do you mean the third part? Can you quote what you're talking about? Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is your name, please, again? Donald. He was saying that he is wondering how does it work that there's the anticipation of this event, and where is the speaker basically located? Because how is it connected to? How does it go? This very internal sort of location of the speaker, and the mentioning of the people in the market, and the gossipers and the peddlers. I was wondering about that too, and I think it has to do with how she sets up, how the poet sets up, like how she situates the speaker. Because I think there's a lot of juxtapositions going on in this poem, and I think the desert on one hand, where potentially this event that no eye has ever seen as of yet is going to happen, be it a birth, the arrival of a loved person, a flower, or something else that we can't really grasp, and the city, the people, the mundane sort of like day to day, and I think that it speaks to the isolation of the speaker, because I feel the speaker somewhere in between. He's somewhere in between the desert and definitely distanced from the people in the marketplace. And I think it is voluntarily so. It's the speaker doesn't want to have anything to do with the people, and I think she's withdrawing and isolating herself in. It's so often repeated in like tireless self-control. Sleeps a lot, waits a lot, is silent, shuts the ears, in order to get herself away from the mundanity of what surrounds her. And I think because she maybe thinks that whatever she's waiting for and preparing herself for, because I think it is the preparation to receive whatever is going to arrive in a place that is not where she is and not with other people. So I think they go together by being opposites, by being contrasted. Yeah. When when sometimes I disguise myself. Are we looking at the English or the Hebrew? Anglit. Sometimes I disguise myself as dead. Right. I think she just. I think that. So Jeff was saying, I am still wondering how these things go together. How there's a person describing how she arrives, how she waits for someone who shall arrive and be seen, and sometimes disguises herself even as dead. How it goes together with the following mentioning of the people. I think it is to build up a contrast. I think it is to show how distant the person is and how she does not want to relate. It doesn't necessarily flow out of another. I think it's a contrast. I think the person, when a person acts peculiarly, the neighbors criticize him and whisper behind his back. And I think that even though it's speaking about a person in the masculine form, but I think it's a person rather than a man, so it can be actually the poet speaking who feels that the neighbors are criticizing him or her for whatever he's doing. Because imagine the person sleeping a lot, waiting a lot, disguising her or himself as dead, and tirelessly self-controlling themselves. That's not taking part in society. That's not being part of that. That's acting peculiarly might be considered in some people's eyes. So I do think it is, on one hand, I think it has a very prophetic level that really transcends a specific individual experience of a specific person, and at the same time, I do think there is a very individual. The individual is definitely built up there to be different from the rest of the people, and so there are a lot of things that we already that sort of came up in passing about like the energy and atmosphere that's being built up in this poem, about how There's a lot of silence. There's a lot of sleeping. There's a lot of waiting. It's really repeated. And I think with this, the tireless expectation and the tireless self-control and waiting a lot, it really builds up. It really builds up to basically the last line, the anticipation of an event, the like of which no eyes has ever seen. And I was wondering about, this could be, we associate redemption with something positive, and it is obviously, and at the same time, it is also an awesome event, where we use this word a lot when we talk about events in Torah or in Tanakh, right? Because on one hand, they're good, they're generated by God, so they are great and good, and at the same time, they are so immense that they are also scary and can be fear-inducing, which is this word that works so perfectly in English for this kind of situation. This awesome has both of it in it, and that's sort of like what I feel here. And talking about biblical references or biblical echoes, I just wanted to point out in the Hebrew, obviously it works more than in the English. There's the word tardema, which is in one of the first. It is in the first line, which is a word that comes up when in Bereshit, when God creates Adam and takes out the rib and creates Eve subsequently. Then Adam is in Tardema, and the word that comes up again is just before the covenant of the pieces, also in Bereshit, when Abraham is like a deep sleep falls over Abraham, and then he sees the vision of his descendants being in Egypt and coming back, and obviously the cutting of the pieces. And all this also very awesome situation that goes on in that covenant. So that word is used, which is also part of what Ravikovic was doing a lot. While she was a modernist person and very I don't know if she would have described herself as a feminist, but she obviously was a female person, one of the few leading women poets in the 1950s in Israel, which don't even have to be in Israel for it's something that requires obviously a lot of strength and a lot of modernism, but of course she also used a lot of biblical echoes and was very well read in it. And the other thing is a direct quote from Ezekiel. It is line 19, which is it's line 18 and line 19. It's Betzipi'a bilti nil'et ani nofachad beharogim ha'ele sheyichyu. It's a quote from Ezekiel. What is the ones with the bones? The vision of the dead bones, dry bones. 37, 39. Hold on, it's here. Chapter 37, Ezekiel, is about when he sees the dry bones. So that is going to be breathed into them again. That's the direct quote from that, which is also interesting in terms of like what kind of redemptive event is anticipated here. Yes, also in terms of how is this describing, does it have more juxtapositions and opposites? So there's this one is the desert and the marketplace and the loneliness and the isolation and the gossiping and the silence, that I'm silent a lot, and then the gossiping and the criticizing of the peddlers and the gossipers in the marketplace. Then we have the tadema, the big sleep and the slumber of senses that is on the speaker in the first line, and that is contrasted a lot with tireless. Like, it's interesting. Like, there's this slumber that is mentioned, and there's a lot of sleep that is mentioned, and at the same time, there's a lot of tension and agitation in that poem. But as she says herself, very self-controlled. So I thought this was very interesting. The silence that is mentioned and the occasional shouting that comes out, and then what's described in the beginning and the end, the breaking through of this head red as the sun, which breaking through and birth and the flower blossoming and the arrival of someone is like the beginning, is like the exit of something, but then it's like compared to Bishkiato, to the setting of the sun. So I thought it was very interesting in terms of how it balances different emotions and times. And all of this really contributes, I find, a lot to this very prophetic nature of this poem. 5:20. We still have a little time if someone still wants to add something. If not, oh yes, Rebecca. Yeah, thank you. Rebecca was saying that maybe what she's waiting for is the breakthrough of her own creativity, and that it sort of describes a process even more than writing. It's more than just a writing process. She said it's more than waiting to. There is the anticipation of a release, right, in it, and I thought of this too. It's like the release of control, the release of the self-control might also be the release finally of like an unbound sort of like creativity and just going with it, awakening of senses, contrasted to the slumber of senses. Yes, that's basically like one of most of the things that I wanted to bring up. I have a short poem that I could just read, and we could end on that. It's the other poem that is in the Hebrew poem itself, which is an amazing book. And I'm just going to read the second poem that they chose, and they obviously chose it on purpose. Makes it more expert in Hebrew poetry than I am, even more what glasses to wear. So I'm just going. And it is called Gava, Pride. Afilu selaim nishbarim ani omeret lecha, velo mechamad zikna. שנים רבות הם שוכבים על גבם בהם שנים כה רבות. כמעט נוצר רושם של שלווה. אין הם זזים קומם, וכך נסתרים מעין גבעה. שנים רבות עוברות עליהם בציפייה. מי שעתיד לשבר אותם עדיין לא בא, ואז האזוב מזגזג, הראשות והחיים מגיח וחוזר, ודומה הם ללא, עד שיבוא כלב ים קטן להתרחק על הסלעים, יבוא וילך, ופתאום האבן פצועה. אמרתי לך, כשסלעים נשברים, זה קורה בהפתעה. ומה גם אנשים. Even rocks break, I tell you, and not of old age. They lie on their backs in the heat and the cold for many years, so many years, and almost create an impression of serenity. They do not budge from their place, and so the cracks are hidden, a kind of pride. Many years pass by them in anticipation. He who is destined to break them has not yet arrived, has not yet come. And then the moss flourishes, and the seaweed swirl, and the sea flows and ebbs. And it seems that they are motionless, until a little seal comes to rub himself against the rocks, comes and goes. And suddenly the stone is wounded. I told you, when the rocks break, it happens surprisingly. And how much the more so people. So in the Hebrew, there are a lot of the same words that are used, breakthrough and the wounds and the coming, of course, of breaking something, Rebecca, in terms of, there's this, the seal comes and then the rock breaks. And while it means something different in this poem, there's the same sort of play with these words of breaking open, wounding, because these words go together in the Hebrew, and the time spent until this will happen.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.